We just have one scripture this morning from Isaiah chapter 58, verses 6 through 9. Is not this the fast that I choose, to loose the bonds of injustice, to undo the straps of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, and to break every yoke? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry and bring the homeless poor into your house, when you see the naked to cover them, and not to hide yourself from your own kin? Then your light shall break forth like the dawn, and your healing shall spring up quickly. Your vindicator shall go before you. The glory of the Lord shall be your rear guard. Then you shall call, and the Lord will answer. You shall cry for help, and he will say, Here I am.
Good morning. We are excited to be able to share our experience of our 4-week trip in Kenya, mostly in September. And slide disappeared.
Because you're talking.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
We went with a group of 9 people all together on a service trip on behalf of Seeds of South Sudan, and then Jill and Jeri Lou and I also combined a service trip on behalf of Angel Covers. So for Seeds of South Sudan, we were visiting the students that the organization supports and conducting some workshops for them. And then with Angel Covers, we visited a clinic that Angel Covers just funded the opening of. And Jill consulted on helping the founder through all of the steps of actually getting the clinic up and running. Hey, this works. All right, get on the right slide. Seeds of South Sudan, you might recall, some of you, that Arak Garang, our founder, spoke here at First United about 3 years ago telling about seeds. He is one of the so-called lost boys of Sudan. In the late 90s, the government troops came and burned his village and killed most of the inhabitants, including his parents and other relatives. He was 7 years old at the time and fortunately escaped because he and other children were out tending cattle in the fields. And so they escaped and joined up with other kids in same circumstances, and they wandered through some of the wilderness and managed to survive for the better part of a year over into Ethiopia and then back into South Sudan. And during that time, of course, some of the kids died, and Rock vowed to God that if he made it, he would do something to help kids like that down the road. So he spent 10 years in Kakuma refugee camp, finally was qualified to come to the United States as I think he was about 17 or 18 years old. Came to the US, attended CU, got a degree in economics with the help of some generous supporters here. And then he went back to Kenya and followed through on his promise and started the Seeds of South Sudan, taking kids out of the refugee camp and sending them to good schools in Kenya. So Kakuma refugee camp is where he wound up and spent the 10 years, as I said. So the first stop that I made in Kenya, I accompanied Arak and one other fellow, a retired professor from DU, and we visited, went up and visited Kakuma refugee camp for 2 nights. Jill and Jeri Lou stayed in Nairobi and played. But it was a very meaningful visit to the refugee camp. This is the layout where just a bit of orientation on the map. This is where Arak was born, in the Paliao area of South Sudan. This is, incidentally, is where our granddaughter, Elsa, was born. She's adopted from Ethiopia. She came here when she was 3.5 years old. And that's only about 200 miles apart, so there's some similarity in the peoples. They are both very tall and slender peoples. So Iraq, in his journey as a refugee, wandered through South Sudan over into Ethiopia, back into South Sudan, eventually made their way to Kakuma refugee camp, which is right here. The other locations in our 4-week visit, this is where the clinic is that we'll be talking about, up in the Kitale area over by Uganda. Nakuru, which is where Seeds of South Sudan is headquartered, and the home base is where the kids spend during their off times from school. And then, of course, Nairobi, which we spent some time in, and that's where you fly in and out of for coming and going to Kenya. Kakuma refugee camp is located in the desert. When you're going to build a refugee camp, of course, you don't want to build it on your best land. You want to build it on land that's a waste. And so it's a very inhospitable place. Nothing speaks desert like camel. And there's camels wandering all over the place outside of Kakuma. Life in the refugee camp is not to be envied. It's hard. The structures are primitive and they're all meant to be temporary, although some of the people have been there for 30 years or more. And there are water borehole wells. They have to carry their water long distances, and food is an issue. People in Kakuma only get 1 meal a day supplied by the United Nations. It's generally either corn or sorghum, which Iraq tells us is rather hard to digest. The students that are selected for acceptance by Seeds of South Sudan are recommended by the elders, and the elders know the students. They live with them every day, these kids, and they sort of pick out those that have the most potential, since not all of them can get out. Those that have most potential intellectually as well as leadership possibilities. So I spent a bit of time interviewing several of the elders about how they go about that very difficult process. And of course, there's cute kids all over the camp. You could spend on days and days taking pictures of cute kids. There are about 200,000 people in the refugee camp. So it's a small city, all built with tin and mud and whatever things they can scrounge to build. About half of those 200,000 are Dinka from South Sudan, and it's the Dinka ethnicity tribe that Iraq is from, and all of the students that we work with. When we were there, Iraq and I and one other fellow, elder named Gabriel, interviewed about 40 kids that are candidates for extracting from the refugee camp. A previous group of us who had visited in July left a number of gifts, and so while they were there, they did not have time to distribute them, so we got to see the joy of the kids receiving some simple things like little notebooks, coloring books, and pencils. Then we went to Nairobi, rejoined Jill and Jeri Lou, and we conducted a couple of workshops for the university students. We have about a dozen or more students that have graduated from high school, and they've gotten sponsors so they can go to higher education, University of Nairobi and other schools there in the city. But a couple of the things they do not get in school are coaching on interview techniques, which they need for possible scholarship consideration, for possible going on to other schools and so forth, and resume writing. So we conducted a couple of workshops, one on each. In this photo, Tom Pond, who is the treasurer of Seeds of South Sudan, is conducting a seminar on interviewing techniques. And after the large group lecture, then they split into small groups where Jeri, Lou, and Jill got to have some interaction and helping the students practice interviewing skills.
It was really interesting as I talked with these girls. The gal on the right was very reluctant to tell me anything about herself. She said, "I'm not ready." And so Alec, the gal in the plaid jacket, I asked her, what did she like best about school? And she opened up. And then we talked a little about what her goals were, what did she want to achieve, and it was just enough to loosen her up that she understood what I was trying to teach her on how you respond in an interview to a question. It wasn't something she had experienced before.
And I had the opportunity to meet with Mamar Tooch Mamar. You can see him up here on the right. And I asked him, okay, what are the strengths that you have that you can bring to a position if you were to interview for a job? His goal is he would like to start his own business, but you have to start at the very beginning. So he thought for a while. He said, I don't know what to say. So I said, okay. Oh, I'm not talking, am I?
Okay, move for you.
Thank you. So I said, think back. You know, you have been very successful so far. You have been chosen to leave Kakuma camp. You came through grade school. You were chosen to get into high school. From there, you're going to university. Surely you have something in your past that you have been able to do, that you succeed at. And he thought, well, I was head boy. I went, what is head boy? He said, well, when I was in school, you know, there were 200 kids in my class, and I was chosen to be the one to go as a go-between the students and the teachers whenever there was a problem to make a resolution. And I said, that's it. Absolutely. You write about that.
We really tried to build up their confidence. The girls are taught to be quiet, and they speak so softly that sometimes we couldn't understand them. So we really worked hard at building their confidence.
And these South Sudanese kids go to school, most of the rest of their class are Kenyans. And so for the Kenyans to vote a South Sudanese as head boy is really something.
Here you see Tom Pond. You remember when we were getting ready to go to Kenya, we asked for any old laptops that you had or notebooks, whatever. Well, thankfully, we got some donations from here, and we brought 8 laptops along with us to Kenya. When a student goes into the university, it is required to have a computer. These kids can't afford a computer, are you kidding? So these old laptops are a true blessing to them. Here you see, Tom is teaching Mamar how to log on. And this is going to be his lifeline for class.
At the end of our visit with the university students, of course, we had to have a group photo, and most of our group is there. These university students, as well as high school and K through 8, are just incredibly grateful for all of the support they get that allow them to go to school. The next morning, we visited Roots Academy in Nakuru. Roots is where we send our students that are K through 8. It's one of the most well-respected schools in all of Kenya, and they have the scores to prove it. There's about 1,800 students, and this is just a very small group of the students that go there. There's many more than about 75 kids that go to Roots. These were the ones we were able to round up. This was a day of celebration. It's a graduation day for the 8th graders. When they graduate, they take a national exam that ranks them and determines which high schools they are qualified to attend. So it's a big deal when 8th grade is finished. This is one of the classrooms at Roots Academy, nothing fancy, very functional, but and well worn, as you can see. Then we went to home base. The students go to school for 3 months out of the year, then they have 1 month off and go back for 3 and so forth. These are all boarding schools. So when they come back for their 1 month break, they come back to home base. This is a converted mansion that was formerly owned by a single family. And imagine converting a mansion to house 75 to 80 kids plus staff. We got a little tour of some of the bedrooms. The bedrooms are stacked high with 4 to 6, even 8 bunk beds in a little tiny bedroom. Fortunately, there's a generous courtyard in the front, and that's where the kids spend a lot of the time. The weather is generally pretty good most of the year in Nakuru. Chess is a big pastime. When Iraq first started working with the kids, he taught them chess. And the chess really caught on, and they've been teaching each other, challenging each other, learning as they go to school. And one of our high school students that I talked to was so good that he qualified for an international championship bout in Namibia. Unfortunately, of course, he couldn't go because there was no money, but that's the kind of caliber that these kids are teaching themselves. And we brought along the word card game Quiddler and started teaching the students. It wasn't long before they were making up their own rules and having just a great time. And of course, one of the real highlights for us from the US visiting was to be able to meet our own personally sponsored students. And here's Jeri Lou with her sponsored student, Iraq.
It was a great joy to finally meet him. Mike and I started sponsoring him after Iraq was here to talk about the SEEDS program. So 2 years, all we knew about him were a couple of letters that another group had brought back. And we didn't even have a picture of him at that point. But he is 13 years old. He is in 4th grade because he was in the refugee camp until he was about 10 years old. He's very shy. It was very hard to get him to smile. But what a joy to finally meet him.
Jill and I have been sponsoring 3 students. Our oldest sponsorship dates back to 5th grade for a Choldao queer on the left. She is now a junior in high school and wants to become a nurse. And Jill will talk about the other 2 students.
Yeah, he also got a chance to give her some photography lessons. She was very interested in that. These 2 strapping young men on my either side. Tooch is wanting to go into electrical engineering, and Bior Wek Dur is a pharmacist. And Tooch is really dear to my heart, I tell you. He's adopted me as his mother. You know, they're all orphans. And he writes to me every week on my little text, and he goes, "How are you doing, Mom? I hope you have a great week." It's just wonderful to get this. And I got to work with Bior quite a lot when we did our health screening. So I'm now another mother.
And Jill put together a team of us volunteers, among the 9 of us, to do health checks for all of the students and staff. They do have access to medical care for emergencies or illness, but they've never had a comprehensive check of their health. And so Jill began with listening for heart sounds.
Yeah. Actually, we had a very dynamic team that joined us. There were 9 of us. Each of them took a station. I took the most complex, obviously, listening to the heart sounds, lung sounds, abdomen. We're listening for any kind of heart murmurs because, you know, malaria will do that to you. And we did find 8 out of the 84 students that had murmur. We also had a little medical card that they took with us to each station as they went along. And go ahead. As you can see here, the next station, they would take their card over, and Mary was with us. She did the blood pressure, the pulse ox, and the temperatures. And Jeri Lou stepped in. I
did some vision screening and color blindness, and out of that group of 84 students and staff, 37 had some eye issues. 19 needed glasses. 4 I found were colorblind, but I told those students, that's really not important. Unless you want to be a pilot, it doesn't matter whether you're colorblind and can't tell purple from red. That made them relieved. Johnny Johnny Fuller was one of the volunteers that came with his aunt and uncle. He's a high school graduate and former football player. He did height and weight. As you can see, his weight's a little bit different than the young man he's measuring. We did find several of the students were underweight, terribly underweight, body mass.
Johnny's about 6 feet. You can tell the other fellow's slightly taller.
That's why he did the height and not me. When we got done with the health screening, we compiled all of the data, and here you see Bior collecting all the cards. Then he and I went through them all, and we compiled a list of the medications that we would need to buy. We went downtown to the chemist, as they call them. It's actually a pharmacy. And we went in and we got deworming medication for 8 students. We got cortisone cream for rashes. We got sty medications. We got ringworm medications. We got something for a wart. Then Bior took them up to the counter. Of course, I speak English. They don't usually speak so much English. So he spoke and he said, how much is this going to cost? And she told him, which I didn't understand because I didn't speak the language. And he turns to me and he goes, oh, this is costing a fortune. I said, well, how much is it? 500 Kenya shillings, he said. I think we can afford it. That's $4.10. Oh, he thought that was a fortune. I couldn't believe it. Then we went across the street and we got some soap for scabies, which cost another 500 Kenya shillings. So for less than $10, we treated 14 patients before we left the camp. It's amazing.
The keyboard we bought in Nairobi, it was a gift from Montview Presbyterian Church's choir. They had raised some money, they sent it with Peggy and Mary, and they said, please buy a keyboard, take it and leave it, and that's what we did. Music lessons are non-existent. Kids learn by rote. They sing, they dance, they don't read music. But we're hoping that there's 1 or 2 older kids that do know some music and that they will teach the younger ones. But who knows, chopsticks, it's universal.
Yeah, they loved it.
While everybody else was working hard doing the health check, I got to be a photographer out in the shade and enjoyed that immensely, taking a portrait of each of the students and staff. And here are a few of the portraits of the students that are sponsored by members of the church here. This is Jeri Lou's Iraq with the sad eyes. This is Aguil Deng Mayen, who Robbie Martin sponsors. She's 13 years old. And her son Eric Martin just picked up Bior Aware Yout, age 12. Bob Abercrombie began sponsoring Aluel Dow Etem, who's 17. And Doug and Elena Faulkner began sponsoring Noyan Mayen Noon, who is 16. And a rock stopped by with his little son Warbeck. He's about 5 years old. Warbeck is a piece of work, as most 5-year-olds are. Very curious and checking out everything he could get his hands on. Johnny was giving him a photo lesson. He was quite curious about this camera. And then another of the highlights of our visit to Nakuru with the students was a workshop that Jill conducted, and Jeri Lou and Peggy, our trip leader, the 3 of them conducted a workshop on becoming a woman, otherwise informally referred to as the sex talk.
I had a blast with this. I can't believe it. There was a group that came a month before us, and they asked, what is it that you would like the next group to prepare when they come? And they said female health. Well, that leaves a lot to be desired. I don't know exactly what all that means, but they didn't feel comfortable with it, and since I'm a nurse, it got passed on to me. So I was very fortunate. Look at how they are glued to my every word. They don't get any sex education in their school. They don't learn about HIV. They don't learn about any kind of preventative for pregnancies. As a matter of fact, they don't have sanitary napkins or tampons, or they have a reusable napkin which they can snap into their underwear, or rags. And so we brought a box of tampons along, and I handed them out, and they're looking at it, and they're pushing up the little plunger, going, ooh, ooh, pulling it back down. They were so much fun. I tell you, that was great. Then we went ahead and broke into groups of 4. And I said, okay, what I'd really like you to do is select one person in your group to be the male. And the other 3 of you, I want you to tell him what it is you want in a man for a partner. They had a wonderful time with this. They were giggling, they were having a great time, and I figured, okay, they're gonna say, I want somebody tall, dark, handsome, right? Oh no, that is not the first things they looked at. They wanted somebody honest, loyal, could provide safety, security for their family, would be hardworking. And then came the tall, dark, and handsome. It was a great group. These kids had a wonderful time. I had kids from all the way from 6 years old to 17. And I know 6 sounds young, but they're probably not going to get this talk again in the near future. And Jeri Lou got an opportunity to share with them.
The little girl in red and white was the 6-year-old, and she said to me, I don't understand. And I said, that's okay. This is normal. It happens to all women. You have older sisters here that will help you to understand it when the time comes. But we asked them to write down in their notebooks, which they carried around and wrote everything down that we said, it seemed like. And the interaction was really good. They help each other. They live together. They are family.
Just before we left in the evening, we had a group shot. This is most of the 75 kids that live at home base, along with a rock and another one of his kids on the left. Sometimes working with a small nonprofit to address a huge problem like refugees feels a bit like this fellow with the lawnmower. But when you consider the impact you make on each individual life, it's very satisfying. If anyone is wondering what sponsorships cost, for K through 12 students, about $150 per month or $1,800 a year. There are half and quarter sponsorships available. Higher education runs a little bit more, and this covers tuition and room and board while they're in school, and the 3 months during the year that they're off at home base. So it covers all of the overhead of running home base as well. We did do a safari for a week, but we don't have time to talk about that, so we just included a couple of the highlights. Giraffes at sunrise. And now we're going to talk about the medical clinic that Jill helped found. It was funded by Angel Covers, and you might note that the name of the clinic includes Angel. Is that a coincidence? No. Julius, Dr. Julius Fentra Sekong, when he was back in school, another organization called Village Volunteers helped him with the initial portion of his school, and Angel Covers helped him complete his school to become a doctor. So even when he was back in school, he had the dream of starting a clinic, and he said, if I get such a dream realized, I will name it Vil Angel, which he did.
This is Julius, and I worked with this man for 4 months. Every week we had a phone conference. We started from ground one. What does it mean to open a clinic? All the way through until he opened the doors on August 21st. I can't believe it. I mean, in 4 months. It took me 6 months here after I've had 4 or 5 times of opening clinics. So I just was amazed at this man. In this clinic, there are 4 offices. You walk in, you go to the reception, then he has his office with an exam table. There's a lab, and then there's a minor procedures room. As you can see here, they do laboratory. And actually, this is the only lab within a 20-mile radius. Julius decided, I want a lab in my clinic. None of the other medical clinics out there have labs. And his wife, Jacqueline, is going to make sure that it's certified. As you can see, okay, they do many different labs there. They do brucellosis, malaria. I mean, we don't do those kind of things out here very often. You don't see that. Look at this. This is built on the corner of a maize field. It's on a crossroads where 2 roads come through and one goes to Uganda. It's 17 miles away from the country's border, and people come by bus, by motorcycle to visit his clinic. This next door is a hotel. Wouldn't you like to stay there? Look at that. Who would live in that? The security guard. This is where the security guard lives, and he watches over that clinic 24/7. I was thrilled to meet him in person. You know, by the time I got to see him, we'd been working together for 5 months. And I was so taken by him. I said, you know, I'm retired. I'm going to give you my stethoscope. And I handed him over my stethoscope. Have stethoscope, will travel, and may it save lives for him too. When we came, of course, we came bearing gifts.
And these are the 4 individuals involved. This is Dr. Sekong himself, his wife, Jacqueline, who's running the lab, his nurse, Daisy Chepkoich, and Collins, the security guard that Jill just mentioned. Need a little more range on this clicker.
Okay. As you can see here, there are 2 big bags in front of them. These are some of the gifts that we gave them. Actually, one of the people that were on the team is a volunteer for Project Cure. And so we brought 9 of those bags with us to Kenya. 50 pounds, they are heavy. 2 of them went to Julius. And you look at the smiles on their face. Daisy and Julius are going through them and they're just thrilled. You know, here in the US, when a doctor does surgery, the surgical tech just kind of put out everything but the kitchen sink. And whatever does not get used gets thrown away. So Project Cure has now contracted with several of the hospitals to gather up those supplies that are not being used. They repackage them, re-sterilize them, pack them in these big bags and ship them off to other countries. And we are very fortunate to have them. Oh, but the best gift that was given, well, I might be a little partial by that because my daughter said, yeah, you gotta get this. This is a fetal heart monitor. It's a Doppler. It listens to the fetal heart tones. And you know, our daughter had a baby boy just a month ago, and she had one of these at home. So she would listen anytime she wanted to, so she could make sure the baby boy was doing just fine. Well, I talked to Julius on Friday, and he said, oh, I just had a woman come in yesterday, and she was devastated. She could not feel the baby in her womb, and we didn't know what to do. And so I got out the fetal monitor, I found the heart sounds, and what a relief it was to the mother. I am so glad we were able to give this gift to them.
The information that I had used in the testing of the students, the eye charts and the color blindness, we took those charts to the clinic and were able, and I was just telling the gals how to use them. And we found out from Julius on Thursday that he is going to use those eye tests in the public school nearby, and it's the first time he's been allowed to go into the school to start doing some health testing. Heartwarming.
This is heartwarming too.
Julius had to dig his own well, 30 feet by shovel by himself. It's the water for the neighborhood that he's living in, and you just bring the water up with a bucket. He's saving money for a pump, but necessary to open the clinic, he had to have water. In addition, behind, here's the maize field, an old home on the left that's not inhabited, but on the right is their bathroom. 3 holes. One door is for the patients in case they are sick. They need to be isolated, and that's cleaned, and then a women's and a man's. It was, and it was very clean. I checked it out myself.
And when she says 3 holes, it was 3 holes.
Concrete floor with a hole in it. And you saw that little chicken on the back, in the right. Julius often gets paid in produce or animals. This is a volunteer. Her name is, I've just forgotten it.
Dorcas.
Dorcas, yes, from the Bible. She is working on writing up the procedures and the techniques that are needed for each test that they do there. That's part of being certified. And what a lovely human being. We bonded immediately after just talking about our past experiences and teaching and learning and writing.
I hope I can go there once again and see this clinic. It's beautiful.
One quick story. These children were not sitting on that bench when I sat out there by myself while Jill and Byron were working in the clinic, taking pictures and interviewing. But across the street, these kids started calling to me, hello, hello, in English. One by one, they came across the street, and I tried to speak to them in English, and they didn't know much more than hello and goodbye. The teacher and me took over. I put up my hands, and I started counting my fingers. 10 children later, we were at 100, all talking in English, doing their counting. The smiles on their faces were unbelievable.
Angel Covers recently completed the funding of a healthcare facility in a poor rural area in the far west of Kenya. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Julius Ventrasekong has a passion for providing medical care to the needy. With Angel Covers' help, he was able to open the Ville Angel Clinic. He talks about the need for low-cost care and his dreams for growth of the clinic's services. He begins by relating the excitement of opening day.
Well, it's a long dream that I had been dreaming of since I was in college. And the day we opened the doors, it was full of joy. I felt relieved. I felt God has done something for me that I'd been praying for. And it was so nice. I felt overwhelmed and thank God, and we had singing and dancing during that day. It was like a new birth to me. Yeah. So my passion in medicine is that I want to help the needy in our society. I decided to specialize in children because I've seen children suffer in hands of, I can say, medics, who think that a child is a small adult, which is not true. A child is supposed to be treated as a child. And also I've seen children being abandoned by their caretakers because they are sick or because they can't help them. So through that, I believe that with my career so far, I believe I will help more. We charge small amount. As I told you, we are dealing with a community that is not, they're actually poor, I can say that. And we charge a little amount just for sustaining, keeping in mind I have a nurse, I have a security, I have a lab technologist whom I need to pay at the end of the month. So the little I get, we get from there, we are actually paying the nurses and the nurse and the lab tech. So we are charging just little amount of money for the services we offer. One of the factors is that people in this community, they are peasant farmers. Some don't have land. Some live on mouth, as it hand to mouth. That is, they only work in the other people's farm, then they are given some little amount of money for their food. So it becomes difficult for them to pay for any services that they have. They are just poor people and they depend on others for them to survive. So that's why they cannot be in a position to pay. My future is, if God willing, I'll wait to see this clinic develop, grow to be a hospital. And as it becomes a hospital, we will be offering services to the community which is near us. We want to have in the future a big hospital with all services available, intertwined with all the sectors of medicine. And as we go towards that, in future, I will also, God willing, we have our own, I have my own piece of land, construct my own hospital. Right now, I'm renting this place. And as we gear towards that, I'm looking forward to have at least 2 medical camps every year, where we go to the community, have a medical camp, teach the community, treat at the community free, and those who need referral will be referred to our facility so that we can manage them at the facility. We're also looking in the future to open smaller clinics nearer to the other communities, to the other villages, where it can be like a satellite, so that when they have any issue that needs referral, we can do that. A bigger dream is to have a medical school with a nursing school in the future within the facilities, so that it will be a training center and everything else. But that's a dream that I have in the future.
I love his dreams. A bigger dream, okay.
This trip was something that I never thought I could do. But Jill's invitation to help her with a clinic was one that I couldn't turn down. To spend a month in Kenya and have time to interact with the people was a true blessing. I was humbled, greatly humbled by the challenges that the South Sudanese students have overcome. but I'm grateful that I can help even one. The world can be changed, one small action at a time. Thank you for your love, your support, and your prayers.
And I want to thank you very much for coming. You can come to the trip anytime. I loved it. I also want to thank you all very much. I have to say, visiting these students and meeting up with Julius and with his family, it just touched my heart. And I am so thankful that you allowed us to share this story with you.
We were really inspired by the students and by Julius. The students refugees have lost everything. They lost their homes, they lost their families, and everything they were familiar with, but yet they are resilient, enthusiastic, and ready to learn. And we were likewise inspired by Julius and his wonderful vision. Thank you.